Hey guys, tonight we are brushing back in time, way back to the banks of the Nile, where the first rays of sun slide over golden dunes and glint off the sleepy eyelids of ancient villagers. You lie there, eyes barely open, wrapped in the comforting scent of warm papyrus and last night's hearth smoke. A donkey brays somewhere nearby. Birds chirp. The Nile murmurs. Your body is stiff from the woven reed mat, but your mind is beginning to stretch, blinking awake into the soft buzz of a civilization just rising with you. Here in ancient Egypt, your alarm clock is the sun itself, and spoiler alert, it doesn't have a snooze button. The light pours through the slats of your reed hut, drawing long shadows across the dirt floor. You rub your teeth together and, ouch. That gritty feeling again. Welcome to a world without Colgate. Your toothpaste? It's somewhere between crushed rocks and crushed hope. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, pushing aside the light papyrus screen that separates your sleeping space from the rest of the hut. Outside, the village is beginning to hum, low voices. The clink of pots, the occasional splash as someone walks into the river for the morning wash. You step out barefoot, feeling the sand shift slightly between your toes. It's not hot yet, but it will be. So, everything starts early. Nearby, a boy with a shaved head, except for one dangling lock on the side, hauls a clay jar onto his shoulder. His mother calls after him, reminding him not to forget the peppermint leaves she asked for at the market. Peppermint, you think. That's the good stuff. You follow the gentle movement of the village as it comes to life. Women in saffron robes draw water from the river, forming a line of glinting clay jars like beads on a necklace. An old man sharpens a copper blade on a flat stone, eyes squinting against the sunlight that now paints the Nile in gold. You pause by a group of children chasing each other with bundles of reeds, their laughter punctuated by the distant bleating of a goat. One child suddenly stops and rubs her teeth with a stick, just casually, as if it's the most normal thing in the world. You lean in. The twig looks frayed at the end, like a tiny natural brush. The bark has been chewed away. She rubs it against her teeth, then spits into the sand. Her brother copies her. It seems like everyone has their own little trick here. Some chew twigs. Others rub their teeth with river sand. You've even heard that a few folks, usually the wealthier ones, crush dried flowers and mix them with vinegar. It's all trial and error, mostly error. Now and then, someone lets out a tiny hiss of pain from a cavity gone rogue. And that's where things get crunchy. The ancient Egyptians knew their teeth didn't last forever, especially with all that bread made from stone-ground flour. You've seen the grinding stones. They're worn smooth from use, and flecks of grit end up in the dough. Basically, your daily bread is secretly made of sandpaper. Historians still argue whether that was just an unfortunate byproduct or a quietly accepted fact of life. Either way, it didn't help the enamel situation. The sun is higher now, casting a hazy glow on the mud brick walls and distant palm trees. A soft breeze lifts the smell of baked earth and carries it toward the river. You wander toward a small cooking area where two women squat by a fire, boiling a thick herbal mixture in a pot. One of them stirs it lazily with a stick, then dabs a finger into the brew and presses it against her teeth. It smells interesting, a little like mint, a lot like mustard. You ask what's in it, and she rattles off a list: crushed rock salt, dried iris petals, powdered pepper, and a drop of honey. A family recipe, she says with a smirk. You glance at her teeth. They're not terrible. Maybe there's something to it. The idea of oral care here isn't exactly about fresh breath and perfect smiles. It's more about not dying of an abscess and maybe avoiding the judgmental eye of the gods. Remember, in the Egyptian afterlife, even your heart gets weighed on a cosmic scale. Imagine showing up with tartar buildup. As you continue down the sand-packed path, you pass a man seated cross-legged beside a flat slab of limestone. He's grinding something with a smaller stone, circular and rhythmic. The powder collects slowly in a groove. You ask what it is, and he tells you it's a mixture of burnt eggshell, ox hoof, and frankincense. For the teeth, of course. You try not to react. He offers you a tiny dab. Against your better judgment, you try it. It tastes like betrayal, but your teeth feel oddly cleaner. Chalky but clean. You wonder again how these people figured all this out. Trial and error? Divine inspiration? A bored priest dropping spices into his mortar and sniffing the results? Historians still debate whether oral hygiene was considered a sacred duty or just a survival strategy, probably both. And as the morning stretches on and the village gets louder, you take a deep breath. The air smells of clay, sweat, and something vaguely floral. It's a new day in a very old world, and somehow your breath is slightly fresher than it was an hour ago. You step away from the man with the hoof powder and head toward a more familiar sight. Women kneeling near stone platforms, grinding grain for the day's bread. The rhythmic scourge, scourge of stone against stone fills the air, and the clouds of flour dust float lazily under the rising sun. You pause, watching one of the younger women working. Her movements are practiced, strong, and steady. At first glance, this looks like any ordinary food preparation ritual. But now that you've had a taste of burnt eggshell and salt on your molars, you're starting to look at these grinding slabs a little differently. These stones don't just produce flour. They produce the very fine grit that slowly wears down the teeth of everyone who eats it. The irony? The same tools that fill your belly are the ones that quietly chip away at your smile. Historians are still debating whether the ancient Egyptians understood this link. Some argue they did, citing occasional efforts to sift flour, while others think they simply accepted toothware as the price of civilization. After all, bread was everything, sacred, symbolic, and served with every meal. Who had time to worry about enamel? You walk a bit closer and notice the woman occasionally pauses to scrape fine powder from the edges of the stone with a flat stick. She gathers it into a clay bowl beside her. Not for bread, for teeth. Yes, that same finely ground grit is used in some households not just to eat, but to clean. You sit beside her, and she offers you a pinch of the powder. She mixes it with a splash of water, creating a muddy gray paste. With a smile, she dips a chewed willow twig into the paste and gestures for you to try. You do. Again, against better judgment. The texture is like brushing with wet sandstone. There's a slight salty tang. And yet, again, your teeth feel cleaner. A boy nearby is carving shallow grooves into a wooden stick with a flint knife. When you ask, he says it's for his grandmother. Her tooth stick wore down, and she needs a fresh one. He doesn't call it a toothbrush. Of course, that concept won't exist for millennia, but you can see the function is essentially the same. It's oddly comforting. How many little oral care moments are scattered across this landscape? Everyone's doing something. There are no mirror selfies with whitening strips here. Just a constant, quietly gritty battle against the inevitable decay. You stand and stretch, walking down toward the river. A man with sun-darkened skin is crouched beside a rock, crushing dried leaves with a flat pestle. He's muttering to himself, part recipe, part prayer. You ask what he's making. Tooth soot, he says. Ah, of course. Apparently, he burns specific herbs, peppermint, myrrh, and something that smells suspiciously like onion, and then crushes the ash into fine powder. The result is black as night, but surprisingly effective at scraping plaque from molars. Or so he claims. You take a whiff. It's smoky, earthy, not entirely awful. As you move on, you find yourself more aware of the tools around you. Mortars and pestles, grinding slabs, carved sticks, even small pieces of cloth, woven tightly, used by some to rub pastes along the gum line. Every household seems to have its own approach. Some swear by vinegar rinses. Others swear at them. You overhear a young woman telling her friend that her cousin mixes powdered lotus seed with honey and swears it keeps her breath sweet enough to charm a priest. The friend laughs and says, breath doesn't matter. Everyone smells like onions anyway. Valid point. You pause under a date palm, taking shelter from the growing heat. Bees hum lazily in the distance. A few goats wander by, eyeing a basket of dried reeds. One of them makes a half-hearted attempt to nibble a twig someone's been using as a brush. You shoo it away, and it bleats at you, unimpressed. And still, through all this bustle, the grind continues. Flour for food, grit for teeth, life, reduced to two fundamental powders. You think about how simple the tools are, and how universal the habits. In every culture, at every point in history, people have had to deal with that strange, stubborn challenge. What to do about the stuff stuck in your teeth? Sure, modern toothpaste comes in 17 different gel colors, some of which look like alien slime. But here, it's just earth, plant, and determination. And honestly, your breath might be better for it. You return to the central part of the village, passing a hut where someone is pounding seeds in a basket. Another person is slicing dried figs for lunch. It all blurs into the same rhythm, the push and pull of daily life, smooth and ancient. You catch a glimpse of someone drying peppermint leaves on a flat woven tray. Another is mashing fenugreek with a splash of Nile water. It's all being done for mouths, yet rarely spoken of, because tooth care isn't glamorous here. It's not a spa day. It's maintenance, survival. And still, somehow, in the middle of this gritty, dusty, utterly unglamorous scene, your teeth feel fresher than they ever did after that overpriced whitening kit you once bought and used exactly twice. The sun now hangs higher in the sky, washing everything in pale gold. A breeze lifts some of the flour dust into the air, and you turn away, blinking. Time to move on. The market's opening, and rumor has it, someone's got a new mint blend worth sampling. You make your way toward the narrow path that leads from the village to the edge of the temple district, where medicine and mystery mingle freely. Here, the huts give way to more orderly walls, stone columns, and flickering incense. The scent of myrrh hangs in the air like a fog of forgotten secrets. This is where you go when things get serious, not a casual scrub or spice blend. No, this is where aching molars and abscesses are taken. Though, judging by the nervous glances of the people waiting in the shaded courtyard, nobody's in a hurry to be first in line. You find a spot near the wall, pretending to study the hieroglyphs, but really, you're eavesdropping. One man mutters that his cousin lost 2 teeth after chewing on too much natron. Another whispers that the priest-physician here, an older man with a face like weathered limestone, once extracted a tooth with copper tweezers and a prayer. Toothaches in ancient Egypt weren't just medical annoyances. They were disruptions to harmony. The body was meant to function like the cosmos, balanced, ordered, and pain-free. If a tooth throbbed, something had gone wrong, not just physically, but spiritually. A young woman emerges from behind a curtain, holding her jaw, eyes watery but still managing a polite nod to the priest. You swallow hard. You're next. Inside, the room is dark, cool, and thick with incense. Statues of Sekhmet and Thoth watch silently from the corners, eyes unblinking. The priest doesn't look up at first. He's grinding something in a bowl, something that looks suspiciously sparkly. You try not to overthink it. Eventually, he gestures for you to sit on a low stool, tilting your head back with a gentle but firm hand. He examines your mouth with surprising patience. Then he nods, reaches for his mixture, and begins. It's a paste of malachite, crushed barley, garlic juice, and a drop of vinegar. Not exactly spa-level freshness, but it has a numbing quality. He applies it with a folded strip of linen and chants softly under his breath. Historians still argue whether these chants were meant to bless the treatment or distract the patient. Maybe both. Either way, you find yourself oddly comforted by the rhythm, even as the vinegar tickles the corners of your eyes. The priest gives you a clay tablet with symbols etched into it, a talisman to keep your mouth healthy. You thank him and slip out into the light, blinking at the return of the sun. You find a shaded spot under a fig tree and rest, reflecting on what just happened. The Egyptians had a surprisingly advanced understanding of oral health for their time. They knew certain plants had antimicrobial properties. They understood that grit helped scrape away buildup. And they had records, written on papyrus and chiseled in stone, that showed a deep concern for the condition of teeth. But they also had moments like this: whispered prayers, crushed gemstones, and secret recipes that may or may not have done anything at all. You stand again and walk along the outer wall of the temple, where baskets of dried herbs sit baking in the sun. A boy flips them carefully to prevent scorching. You recognize mint, basil, cinnamon, and what looks like dried lotus root. Nearby, another man is mixing natron with honey. He dips a fingertip into the paste and rubs it against his gums, wincing slightly. He swears it works. His friend shrugs and suggests adding onion juice next time. A bold move. You chuckle softly to yourself and keep walking, the sand warm beneath your feet. At the base of a stairway, two scribes are seated cross-legged with papyrus scrolls. They're recording patient visits, names, symptoms, treatments, and occasionally a note like "offered thanks" with 2 silver rings, payment in gratitude and trinkets. One scribe shows you an old scroll listing dental conditions. Inflammation of the tooth root, it reads, to be soothed with a poultice of crushed goosebone and fig sap. Another describes a mouth rinse made from beer, salt, and cumin. Not exactly mouthwash material you'd see in a commercial, but probably effective in its own way, at least temporarily. Historians still debate whether these treatments were genuinely helpful or simply palliative, meant to ease discomfort without addressing the real cause. After all, without antibiotics or x-rays, options were limited. And yet, you marvel at the creativity, the range of substances used, the level of concern shown. These were not people who ignored dental health. They tackled it with everything they had. You step away from the scrolls and return toward the village. The bustle now a bit quieter under the afternoon sun. Children are napping in the shade. The grinding stones have paused. A woman tends a small fire, fanning it gently while humming a lullaby. You pause at a communal basin where a group of women are rinsing their mouths, laughing between spits. One of them offers you a handful of paste made from salt and pounded date seeds. You try it. It's oddly sweet, with just a hint of grit. Not bad. As the wind kicks up a little trail of dust along the riverbank, you begin to understand something deeper. In a world without dentists, people still tried. They blended faith and observation, tradition and experimentation, all in the service of something as simple and as essential as a clean mouth. And the more you think about it, the more impressive it becomes. These weren't crude guesses. They were daily rituals repeated over generations, honed with patience and passed down like sacred knowledge. You reach your hut again, lips tingling from your latest taste test. You sit in the shade, gazing at the Nile's glittering skin, and wonder, which part of this will archaeologists find one day? Which jar, which toothstick, which papyrus scroll will end up in a museum, misinterpreted as a cosmetic item, when it was really just the morning routine of someone a lot like you? You close your eyes and for a moment, The scent of peppermint and dust mingles on the air like an ancient lullaby. The sun drifts westward now, tilting shadows long across the sand as you rise once more and head down toward the open-air market. It's not the grand bazaar of legend. No jewel-toned tents or dazzling silk banners. Just a dusty patch of ground along the riverbank where villagers lay woven mats, place clay bowls atop them, and hope today brings good trade. You weave between sellers with sun-leathered skin and hopeful smiles, their fingers stained with herbs, minerals, and the red dust of the Nile. Here, oral care isn't tucked away in a sleek bathroom cabinet. It's sprawled across the market in baskets and bowls. Natural remedies, passed hand to hand. Your eyes settle first on a man fanning flies from a display of natron. The powder sparkles faintly in the sun, white, crystalline, and promising. He scoops up a pinch between two fingers, rubs it into his gums with exaggerated satisfaction, and grins at you with exactly 3 remaining front teeth. You nod politely and move on. The next vendor has a more colorful display. Dried myrrh, frankincense beads, small bundles of dried mint leaves, and a few suspiciously shaped lumps that might be donkey hooves. You raise an eyebrow. "For strength," she says, nodding. "For inside the mouth." You try not to look skeptical. Some of the ingredients are familiar, others less so. A young boy hawks powdered pumice in little ceramic jars. A woman offers the good salt from deep desert caves. Someone else is boiling a mixture of onion juice and basil over a tiny charcoal fire. You ask what it's for. "To keep the mouth warm," she answers. Not entirely helpful. Historians still debate the logic behind many of these combinations. Were they meant to clean, to cure, to charm, or simply to keep one's mouth too preoccupied to complain? No one agrees. Maybe the answer is all of the above. A particularly enthusiastic vendor waves you over. His prized item? Burnt eggshells, ground finely and stored in linen-wrapped bundles. He insists they scrub teeth like crocodile skin scrubs the river clean. A strong metaphor. And yet, you see a few customers eagerly handing over beads and tiny bronze pins for their daily dose of shell dust. You kneel beside a trader offering bundles of chewed twigs, some from the Salvadora persica tree, others from acacia or willow. The ends are frayed and fibrous, darkened with use. These are the toothbrushes of the time. Simple, portable, reusable. She picks one up, chews the end to soften it, then runs it gently across her teeth. "Good for the blood," she says, gesturing toward her gums. "Keeps the ancestors happy." That part you hadn't heard before. Gums as sacred offerings. Interesting. You purchase one of the twigs and give it a tentative chew. The wood softens between your teeth. Bitter at first, then oddly soothing. You rub it across your teeth, mimicking her movements. A nearby goat eyes you suspiciously. You ignore it. Another mat features powders mixed with flower petals, blue lotus, hibiscus, even the occasional rose. Their scent is faint, but pleasing. And the vendor explains that beauty is not just for the face, but also for the breath. If your mouth smells sweet, your soul must too. A comforting idea, if not scientifically proven. You wander a little deeper into the market and find the eccentric herb woman. Every village has one. She's wrapped in saffron and indigo cloth, her fingers stained with ash and oil. She offers you something wrapped in fig leaves. You peek inside. A blend of honey, crushed charcoal, rock salt, and, possibly, cinnamon. She gestures for you to smell. It's sharp, smoky, and strangely familiar. She claims it comes from her grandmother's grandmother, a lineage of mouth healers. She also says it keeps snakes away, which might be a bonus. You notice a cluster of younger villagers gathered around a large mortar. A man is giving a demonstration, grinding a mixture of natron, dried peppermint, and vinegar-soaked bark. He dabs it onto his teeth with a cloth strip, then passes the bowl around. The scent hits you first, bright, almost modern. You try a bit on your cloth-wrapped finger. The fizz from the vinegar surprises you, and the peppermint stings in a refreshing way. For a second, you could swear you're brushing your teeth back in 2025, and then someone sneezes in your face, and you're firmly back in 1500 BCE. You wipe your hands and thank the man. He nods sagely, adjusting his linen wrap. You ask how he learned the recipe. Dreams, he says. Right. You make one final stop at the edge of the market, where a child offers breath beads, tiny dried pellets wrapped in papyrus, made from dried orange peel, anise, and something that might be cumin. You try one. It's bitter, but oddly effective. The aftertaste lingers on your tongue like a whisper from the past. Historians still puzzle over whether these markets were truly communal pharmacies or simply oral tradition made tangible. But for you, the answer doesn't matter. What you see is a 1,000-year-long commitment to something very simple, the desire to not walk around with your mouth smelling like goat stew. As the market winds down and shadows stretch farther along the Nile's edge, you stroll back through the rows of mats and baskets. Everyone is packing up, chatting, bartering the final items of the day. The sun hangs low now, casting a warm amber wash over the earth. You hold your little bundle of twigs, salts, and strange pastes like treasure. And perhaps in some quiet way, it is. Because in this age, without dentists, without toothbrush timers, without mint-flavored foam, you realize that care was not just a modern invention. It was here all along. Just a little grittier. The market fades behind you as you follow a winding footpath that skirts the edge of the river. The air smells of silt and slow water, and you pass a palm tree whose shadow stretches long and thin across the sand. Just ahead, tucked between the reeds, stands one of the smaller temples, modest but still sacred. And tonight, you're feeling brave enough to peek inside. You've heard whispers that this place houses scrolls, ancient ones, describing not just healing rituals, but the divine relationship between cleanliness and spiritual harmony. You duck beneath a low lintel, the air inside cool and thick with incense. The walls are close here, and the shadows cling to the painted stone. A scribe sits near the far wall, hunched over a strip of papyrus, his reed brush dancing steadily in tiny strokes. Beside him, a small stack of scrolls bound tightly with twine. You approach slowly, and he doesn't look up, but gestures toward a nearby stool, a silent invitation. You sit, careful not to disturb the bowls of ink, and glance sideways at one of the scrolls that's already unrolled. The characters are precise, measured, like someone took extra care to make the words, well, eternal. You begin to read slowly. To cleanse the vessel of breath, take the salt of the earth and the sweetness of the bee. Mix with the water of life and the herb of cool tongue. Offer this mixture to the mouth before first light and again before darkness. So, a toothpaste recipe. But dressed like a hymn, it's not the only one. You flip gently through another scroll and find lines describing what sounds like an early dental ritual, performed not in private, but as a group. People gathered, not unlike a small congregation, each holding a bowl of cleansing powder. They would hum softly, repeating verses to the goddess Ama'at, seeking balance not just in the soul, but in the mouth. Historians still argue whether these were practical guides or spiritual metaphors. Were these literal dental care instructions or poetic allegories for purity? Maybe both. Maybe the line between plaque and sin was thinner than we think. You read on. Some scrolls list ingredients familiar from the market: myrrh, salt, iris petals, vinegar. Others mention more curious items: stone of the night, possibly obsidian, milk of the fig, sap, and breath of crocodile. Unclear, and you're okay not knowing. But the format stays consistent. Each recipe begins with a reference to the divine. Tooth care, it seems, was a sacred act. Cleaning the mouth meant aligning the self. A messy mouth, like a messy offering, was not welcome before the gods. You reach a passage attributed to a temple physician named Nebotep. Should the gums bleed, apply powder of the sunstone and seed of the bitter pod. Do not speak for 1 hour, lest the balance be lost again. He sounds strict, but possibly effective. You glance at the scribe. He still hasn't looked up, but he's unrolling another scroll for you. This one's different. Older, the edges frayed, the ink faded. The script is larger, less refined, less priestly, more domestic. And the words? Well, they hit different. To make the teeth shine, take a pinch of river sand, grind finely with dried leaf of peppermint. Add honey, stir with stick. Do not swallow. Ah, that sounds more like something from the back of someone's kitchen shelf. A practical how-to. No divine metaphors, no cleansing the soul through enamel. Just a recipe and a warning. You love it instantly. As you read further, you come across scribbled notes in the margins, tiny sketches of teeth, a warning symbol next to the word vinegar, and even a doodle of what might be a crocodile wearing a crown. Either the ancient author had a sense of humor, or someone later did some light vandalism. You can't help but smile. And that's when it occurs to you. These scrolls are like the world's earliest self-help books. They combine the sacred and the practical, the poetic and the painfully literal. They're not just guides for keeping teeth clean. They're reflections of how these people viewed the body, the spirit, and the invisible lines connecting them. You gently roll up the final scroll and nod your thanks to the scribe. Still silent, he gives a slight incline of his head and goes back to his brush. You rise, slipping out into the dusk as a soft breeze curls in from the river. Outside, the world has changed color, warm gold fading into plum and lavender. Lamps are being lit, tiny flickers of flame inside clay bowls. You walk slowly, your fingers still tingling from the papyrus. There's something soothing about the texture of history, crackling under your skin like dry parchment. As you pass back through the village edge, a few people are finishing their evening routines. A man swishes a rinse made from beer and mint. A child chews on a stick while her mother hums beside her. You hear someone spit into the sand and then laugh, as if something in the taste surprised them. You wonder how many scrolls never made it to the temple, how many family recipes for pastes and powders were passed down orally, generation to generation, then lost to time. Not everything ends up in stone or ink, but it doesn't have to. The knowledge lives in hands, in habits. In the way someone chooses to start and end their day with a little twig and a bowl of powder. And as you dip your fingers into the small pouch of peppermint bark you picked up at the market, crushing a bit between your molars, you taste it. The past still sharp, still bright, still strangely effective. You wander further into the heart of the village now, drawn by the dim glow of firelight, flickering from within a cluster of low, wide huts. There's a hush to the atmosphere, less bustle, more ritual. You can feel it in the slow gestures of people preparing for evening, the way they rinse their hands with careful reverence, and especially in the stories whispered over coals. Tonight, the talk turns to pharaohs. Someone mentions Cleopatra, and immediately, half a dozen people lean in, eyes glinting in the firelight. Even here, centuries before her birth, the mystique of rulers looms large, legends stretching backward and forward through time like golden thread. You sit on a worn reed mat and listen. They say she mixed her paste from rose oil and pearls, someone murmurs, and her breath could make a priest forget his prayers. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds unlikely, but also oddly plausible. She was, after all, Cleopatra. But she's not the only royal whose teeth inspired awe. You hear tales of Tutankhamun's physicians who used crushed turquoise in mouth rinses, of Hatshepsut's servants tasked with fetching herbs from Nubia for her private oral blend, of Ramses II, whose mummified remains, still studied today, show a mouth worn down from years of bread and grit. Not quite the gleaming smile you'd imagine on the statue. Still, pharaohs cared deeply about appearances. And while eye makeup and jewelry got most of the attention, oral hygiene was part of the royal package. You can picture it now. A palace attendant kneeling beside a stone basin, gently rubbing powdered natron across the queen's gums with a piece of fine linen. "Breathe in," he might say, "and now hold it." The mixture would sting, just enough to feel holy. Just enough to feel alive. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing in a grand chamber, polished alabaster floors, columns wrapped in gold leaf vines, the air cool, the windows high. A tray sits beside the throne, laid with tiny ceramic bowls, one for crushed mint, one for dried date pits, another for rose oil. No toothbrush, no plastic packaging, just earth, plant, and time. And the queen, resplendent in cobalt and gold, leans forward and breathes across your cheek. Fresh. Maybe. You snap back to the present as a woman beside you cackles, claiming her grandmother swore by using crushed beetle shell in paste. "For sparkle," she says, "like stars on your teeth." Her companion grimaces and adds, "That's what made her go half blind." Well, beauty has its price. You ask around, gently, about actual recipes passed down from the palace kitchens. One man claims his great-grandfather's scroll included an entry called "Mixture for Morning Royal Mouth." It supposedly combined barley flour, powdered rock crystal, a drop of date sap, and something cryptically labeled sun ash. Historians still argue what sun ash might have meant. Some suggest dried citrus peel, others lean toward powdered gold leaf. One particularly eccentric theory claims it was literally ash collected at sunrise from temple braziers, believed to carry the energy of Ra himself. Whatever it was, it probably didn't taste great. But that wasn't the point. For the elite, toothpaste wasn't just about function. It was about symbolism. Clean breath was clean intention. A well-kept mouth was a reflection of divine favor. And while commoners had their twigs and natron, royalty had access to ingredients from every corner of the known world. You ask a teenage boy what he thinks pharaohs used. He shrugs and says, "Probably the same thing we do, just fancier." Which might be the wisest answer of the night. You glance over as a matronly woman begins preparing her family's evening mix. She scoops powdered salt from a small jar, adds a pinch of dried mint, a few drops of vinegar, and stirs it with a narrow stick carved with tiny glyphs. She dabs the paste onto a strip of cloth and hands it around. Each child takes a turn scrubbing their teeth, mouths twisted into funny expressions. It's a bedtime ritual. Plain and simple. Sacred in its own small way. You're handed the cloth next. You try it. The salt hits first, sharp, briny. Then the mint, a slow burn. The vinegar tightens your tongue. It's not pleasant exactly, but not unpleasant either. You've had worse at modern health food stores. And it works. You feel it. That soft abrasion, the faint sting, the sharp inhale after rinsing. There's something deeply satisfying about it, as if you've not only cleaned your teeth, but swept out the dusty corners of your soul. Beside you, the fire pops. Someone tosses in a pinch of crushed herbs, and the smoke curls upward like a question mark into the night. Another round of stories begins, this one about a queen who used clove and garlic juice to ward off evil spirits. No one agrees whether it worked, but everyone agrees it would keep suitors at bay. The moon is climbing now, pale and full above the river, and the breeze is cooler. The laughter softens, and families begin to drift toward their homes, children tucked under arms, reed mats rolled and carried under stars. You stay seated a little longer, gazing at the fire's final glow. In a world without electricity, without mirrors, Without whitening kits or bubblegum gel, these people crafted a routine that was part medicine, part ritual, and part art. It wasn't sterile or sterile looking. It wasn't pearly white smiles for photos. It was something more intimate. A way of caring for yourself when no one was watching, because your breath mattered, your health mattered, your offerings to the gods mattered, and in a place where the line between sacred and practical was so thin, even toothpaste walked like a pharaoh. The stars are high above now, shimmering like fish scales tossed across the dark velvet of the sky. You've left the fireside behind, walking slowly down a sandy path that leads out of the village proper. Here the reeds grow taller, the sounds are quieter, and the air grows cooler with each step. Ahead, a flickering torchlight marks a cluster of tents. Travelers, merchants, the ones who bring strange things from far-off lands and stranger things from their own imaginations. You approach, drawn by the sound of quiet bartering and the irresistible clink of ceramic jars. One tent flaps open, revealing a man seated cross-legged on a woven rug, surrounded by tiny pots, bundles of dried leaves, and sacks of powder. He smiles wide, showing a full row of surprisingly white teeth. "My name is Amun," he says, "and what I sell will make your breath sweeter than lotus and your teeth brighter than moonlight." You sit. He begins his pitch, and it is, let's be honest, magnificent. A mixture of fact, fiction, and flamboyance. He claims to have walked through the spice markets of the Indus Valley, sailed beside Phoenician dye merchants, and sipped tea with cinnamon farmers beyond the desert rim. Whether it's true or not, you can't say, but the jars before him are real. One contains cinnamon bark, shaved and dried. Another holds powdered oxbone, burned until blackened. There's also a bowl of crushed oyster shells, white as chalk and fine as flour. You're invited to smell each, touch the powders with your fingertips. One scent rises above the others. Clove. Warm, spicy, strangely comforting. Amun explains, cinnamon to sweeten, oxbone to polish, oyster shell to abrade, clove to numb. You nod slowly. The combination makes sense. You'd seen parts of it in the market earlier, but not this refined. These are trade goods, brought from afar, blended with care. This isn't the village twig and sand approach. This is high-end hygiene. You try a pinch. The clove numbs your tongue almost immediately. Your teeth feel cleaner, and your lips buzz like they've just kissed a lightning beetle. He beams at your reaction. "That's the good batch," he says. "Used it myself before visiting a princess once. She let me talk for hours." You smile, unsure whether it's the story or the clove that's made your lips tingle. Other travelers come and go. Some barter for spice, others for bundles of chewed licorice root, said to naturally sweeten breath and strengthen teeth. You watch as a merchant from Nubia offers a small block of what looks like tar. Amun scrapes off a sliver and explains it's made from burned dates and acacia resin. Sticky, he warns, but effective. Historians still argue about how widespread these kinds of ingredients were. Some say they were luxuries for the elite. Others believe traveling merchants made them accessible to anyone with something worth trading. In truth, it likely depended on the season, the region, and the willingness to try something strange. A man nearby is mixing something on a flat stone, a paste of ash, clove, myrrh, and what looks like charcoal powder. He dips a frayed reed brush into the thick black smear and scrubs at his teeth with slow, practiced strokes. When he finishes, he spits into the sand, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and flashes a grin that would make even a dentist today pause and say, "Not bad." You begin to notice a pattern. The farther goods travel, the more refined they become. Tooth care, like all ancient arts, thrives on exchange. The mixing of traditions. Egyptian salt, Nubian resin, Indus cinnamon, Syrian myrrh, all meeting in tiny jars, rubbed on teeth by moonlight. It's not just medicine, it's memory. Each blend carries with it the smell of another land, the story of another mouth, the touch of a hand that once crushed it to dust. You sit quietly as Amun prepares a fresh mixture, this time adding a hint of anise seed and a drop of sesame oil. He mixes it in a shallow dish, forming a soft, earthy paste. He spreads a little on a flat stick and offers it to you. You taste. It's different. Not sweet, not strong, but strangely comforting. You chew slowly, sensing layers, smoke, salt, warmth. It doesn't scream clean like modern mint. It hums, and it lingers. You thank him, offering a small carved bead in return. He accepts it like a gemstone and tucks it into his pouch. May your words always taste better than your silence, he says. Nice line. You step away from the tent, paste still tingling in your mouth, and wander through the other stalls. Someone sells jars shaped like animal heads: falcon, jackal, crocodile, each filled with a different kind of powder. A woman offers reed brushes dyed with crushed beetle shell, promising a glimmer like river starlight. One merchant whispers about a secret blend used by priests before reciting sacred rites, apparently made with blue lotus and powdered gold. You don't try that one. It costs more than your sandals. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of spice and charcoal through the reeds. In the distance you can hear laughter, a lyre being plucked, the splash of someone washing up before sleep. The night grows deeper, and the stars more insistent. As you make your way back toward the village path, you carry with you not just a faint numbness in your gums, but a sense of something bigger. Toothpaste, if you can even call it that, was never just about the mouth. It was trade. It was trust. It was the blending of worlds into something tangible, useful, and oddly poetic. And long before there were tubes and twist caps, there were jars in the desert and voices in the dark, trading secrets by firelight, one pinch of powder at a time. You wake to the sound of water slapping gently against the riverbank. The early morning mist curls like silk across the surface of the Nile, veiling the world in pale silver. The village is still quiet. No footsteps, no grinding stones. Not even the goats have begun their daily protests. This is the hour for the commoner's hygiene. You rise from your reed mat and stretch, your back stiff, but your mouth all ready. Sandy, you lick your lips and taste yesterday's clove paste, now faded into something chalky and distant. The time has come. You reach for your own tiny pouch of salt and mint, then grab the chewed twig you tucked beside your mat the night before. It's dry and stiff now, so you chew the end again, working it with your molars until the fibers loosen into a crude little brush. You walk barefoot to the river, the cool sand damp from dew. Beside you, a few other villagers are beginning to stir. Women with water jugs, a boy yawning with a bundle of reeds over one shoulder, an elderly man crouched near the water, already brushing his teeth with a stick even older than he is. You sit by the bank and scoop a bit of your homemade paste onto the end of your twig. It's gritty, salty, with the ghost of peppermint. You scrub gently, in circles like you've seen others do. There's no mirror, of course, no timer, no catchy jingle playing in your head, just the sound of rippling water and the occasional bird calling overhead. The paste foams a little, though that might just be your imagination, and you spit into the sand. A goat nearby watches, unimpressed. Around you, others begin to do the same. One man pulls out a flat stone and grinds a few herbs freshly gathered that morning. A child splashes water into her mouth and gurgles dramatically, clearly enjoying the attention. A woman methodically dabs her teeth with a damp cloth dipped in honeyed salt. It's not coordinated. It's not ceremonial. But it's a shared rhythm, a morning pattern that flows from person to person, hut to hut, like music without melody. Historians still debate whether these habits were truly widespread among lower-class Egyptians, or if we're retrofitting modern interpretations onto fragmentary evidence. Some argue that dental care was a luxury of the elite, But the truth seems to lie somewhere in between. Because here, now, you're watching a village clean its teeth without ceremony, without fanfare. Just because. Because it hurts when they don't. Because someone's mother showed them how. Because it makes kissing slightly less dangerous. You remember the market powders, the temple scrolls, the traveling merchant's exotic blends. But none of that matters here. Here there is no clove oil, no oyster shell, just sticks, grit, salt, and the patient repetition of something learned long ago. And it works, at least enough. You rinse with a handful of river water, cold and sweet, then rise and stretch. Your teeth feel smoother. Not dentist smooth, but close. And without the minty burn. You can actually taste the air, the hint of clay, the wet green of reeds, the slightly fishy whisper of the Nile. Back in the village, the fires are starting. You smell breakfast, lentils perhaps, or barley cakes. Someone's roasting onions, which feels cruel considering you just brushed your teeth. But life must go on. A boy passes by chewing a twig so aggressively it squeaks. You ask if he uses paste. He shrugs and says his grandmother rubs the stick with date sap and ashes. Tastes awful, he says. But she says it keeps the ancestors from shaking their heads at me. That's motivation if you've ever heard it. You visit a friend's home, a low, cool hut, painted with ochre swirls, and watch as her family gathers around a shallow bowl filled with salt water and herbs. One by one, they rinse, spit, and pass the bowl along. It's not glamorous, but it's intimate. It's part of the day, like stretching or blinking or whispering. Thanks to the sun, they offer you a try. The water is briny and slightly bitter. You swish, you spit, you nod, and they nod back, approving. In the corner of the hut, you notice a bundle of dried sticks tied with colored thread. Some are older, darker, chewed at both ends. Relics of dental devotion, like trophies, but for hygiene. A younger child brings you her favorite brush, a tiny twig with one end split like a fan. She holds it out like a wand. It tickles, she says, giggling. You try it. She's right. Outside again. The sun climbs higher, the village grows louder, but your mouth feels ready. Not pristine, not peppermint fresh, but clean, like you belong to this land, to this rhythm, to this long line of people who found their own ways of caring. And you begin to wonder how long these habits have been passed down, how many generations learned to chew a stick, to grind a leaf, to find comfort in the simple act of scraping away the dust of yesterday. No dentist, no plastic, no fluoride, but there is care. There is repetition, and there is the undeniable human instinct to do something, even a little something, about that thing stuck between your back molars. And as the morning stretches, and the bread begins to bake, and the world wakes up again, you smile. Because today, like every day, you brushed your teeth with crushed rocks and a twig. And somehow, it feels just right. The midday heat settles over the village like a thick wool blanket left out in the sun. You retreat toward the temple district again, not for shade this time, but curiosity. There's a story you've heard, passed in whispers around cooking fires and market stalls, that some temples doubled as clinics, and that deep within their cool stone chambers were not just prayers, but pliers. You pass under a lintel carved with falcons and ankhs, and step into a chamber dimly lit by a high slit window. The air is cooler here, scented with crushed lotus and old ash. At first, it's silent, eerily so. Then you hear it, a low voice humming, almost chanting, and the gentle clink of ceramic against stone. You round the corner and find him, the Wabsunu, a priest of healing. He sits cross-legged on a low stool, robes wrapped carefully around him, his hair oiled and precise. Before him, a low table with 3 items, a bronze spatula, a small jar of dark paste, and a pair of copper tongs that make your teeth ache just to look at them. He glances up and beckons silently. You sit. A young man is already in the chair, a carved stone bench with a tilted headrest, and he does not look thrilled. The priest hums softly as he peers into the boy's mouth, then dips his spatula into the paste and smears it along the gums. The boy flinches. The priest raises a single eyebrow as if to say, brace yourself. Historians still argue whether these priests were skilled medical practitioners or simply the best someone could hope for in the absence of a dental college. Some temple scrolls describe careful oral procedures, scaling with sharpened reeds, gum massage with salt and honey, but others are more aggressive, extractions done with heat, with pressure, with prayer. This seems to be the gentler kind. For now. You ask what's in the paste, and the priest, still humming, responds without looking. Myrrh, frankincense, onion juice, and powdered malachite. You recognize all of them from past concoctions, but in this combination, it smells like anesthesia and ambition. The priest finally presses a strip of linen soaked in vinegar into the boy's mouth, tells him to wait, and then turns to you. Without prompting, he begins preparing a second paste, this one with rock salt and crushed fenugreek. He mimes rubbing it into the gums and hands you a piece of linen. A try-it-yourself moment. You oblige. It burns. Not in a bad way, though, like a deep cleaning face mask for your mouth. The salt bites, the fenugreek numbs, and you feel oddly proud for not immediately spitting it across the room. The boy on the bench sighs in relief. He's not missing a tooth, yet, but the swelling has gone down. The priest nods. No extraction today. You glance to the side wall. Shelves are stacked with tiny jars, bundles of herbs, old cloth strips and tools, bone-handled scrapers, bronze awls, obsidian blades. There's even a little bowl of chewed willow bark. Tooth treatment, clearly, was not limited to the rich or vain. It was handled here, in this quiet temple room, by men who knew both the body and the gods. And just as you're thinking that, the priest lifts a jar etched with glyphs you recognize. Breath, purity, divine. He opens it and wafts it toward you. The scent is astonishing, sweet, herbal, crisp. He says it's used before prayers, because no one should speak to the gods with foul breath. So yes, even deities apparently had standards. You take a dab. Rub it across your tongue. It's a blend of honey, peppermint, and what might be dry date flour. Not quite modern toothpaste, but almost elegant. You thank the priest, who finally breaks his silence with one word: balance. He gestures toward a carved panel on the wall. Ma'at, the goddess of order and balance, weighing a heart against a feather. To be clean in body, he says softly, is to be clean in spirit. You leave quietly. Outside, the sunlight feels hotter now. The wind has picked up, stirring sand into little curls at your feet. You walk past others arriving at the temple, some limping, some groaning, some looking suspiciously like you did before your first vinegar scrub. Back in the village, you pass a woman with a swollen jaw and a child carrying a bowl of herbal paste. Everyone has a role to play, not just in pain, but in healing. A grandmother applies crushed mint to her daughter's gums while muttering under her breath. A teenage boy scrapes the inside of a fig twig and rubs it along his molars. And then there are the stories. You hear them floating from hut to hut. Of a priest who cured an entire household with nothing but natron and silence. Of a man who survived a terrible infection after praying to Thoth and rubbing his gums with barley ash. Of a woman who bit through a copper mirror during childbirth, and her husband invented a calming powder that tasted like dreams and soot. You doubt most of them, but also, you kind of hope they're true. Because in this world, where no one owns a toothbrush and fluoride is 1,000 dynasties away, people have made do with what they had. They've blended, ground, chanted, and extracted. They've turned suffering into science and daily care into sacred rhythm. You pass a hut where someone is boiling a paste of garlic and goat milk. Another where a girl is laughing while her sister rubs her teeth with a cinnamon twig. A third where a man is trying, unsuccessfully, to teach his parrot to say, "rinse and spit." You pause, smile, and realize something. For every terrifying tool inside that temple, there's a moment of laughter outside it. For every copper tong, a frayed twig. For every priestly procedure, a grandmother's homemade cure. The dentists of ancient Egypt were not just priests. They were mothers, traders, travelers, children with good memories and curious minds. And maybe the divine lived not only in temples, but in the tiny rituals repeated every day at sunrise and sunset by people who just wanted their mouths to stop hurting, and maybe to impress a neighbor. You wake again, this time to the gentle scrape of papyrus being unrolled near your ear. You're not in your own hut this morning, but visiting a quiet household at the edge of the village. One of the elders here is said to be a collector, not of beads or bowls or dried lizard skins, but of recipes. Tooth recipes. The old man sits cross-legged, his fingers calloused and ink-stained, spreading out half a dozen sheets of aged papyrus across the ground. The scrolls smell like dust and crushed time. He doesn't say much, just nods toward the first page. You lean in. Mixture for the cleaning of the mouth, grind salt, mint, and pepper. Mix with honey until thick. Apply with reed. Simple. Brutal. Effective. The next is more poetic. When the breath grows sour and the tooth gives pain, mix the ash of goose feather with sap of fig and water of morning river. Rinse without speaking. There it is again, that odd combination of practical and mystical. The idea that certain times of day, certain silences, could enhance the power of a paste. You keep reading. Some scrolls are barely legible, scratched with cramped handwriting, smudged with ash, edges torn. Others are carefully scribed, with headings in red ink and ingredients listed like a spellbook. Rock salt, crushed iris root, vinegar, pulp of boiled date, sun-dried barley husk. Historians still debate the intent behind these documents. Were they widely distributed or closely guarded? Healing records or household secrets? Some scholars argue they were meant as formal medical archives. Others think they were more like family cookbooks, scribbled with whatever worked last time and handed down with a warning, "Don't forget to stir." You come across a particularly elaborate recipe. To make the mouth pleasing to Ra, take natron of fine grain, crush with cinnamon, add milk of almond and oil of clove. Boil gently under the morning sun, strain through cloth, store in a vessel of cool stone. You imagine someone actually doing that, standing outside at dawn, boiling clove oil under the watchful eye of a sun god, just to rinse before breakfast. Respect. The elder gestures to a nearby shelf where small jars rest under a veil of linen. You open a few. One smells strongly of vinegar and copper. Another, like crushed flowers, and something almost minty, perhaps sweet basil. A third one is darker, pungent, sticky to the touch. When you ask, he chuckles. Left too long in the sun, he says. Now it's for rats. You smile and keep sniffing. Some ingredients come up again and again. Salt, pepper, vinegar, mint, honey, iris root. They form the base of nearly every mixture. But it's the additions that make each recipe personal, like kitchen experiments with very high dental stakes. One scroll lists stone of the falcon's egg. You glance up in confusion. It means ash from the northern fire pit, the elder explains. It turns pale like a falcon's egg if burned just right. Good to know. You find another recipe labeled for wedding days. It combines cinnamon bark, date syrup, lotus root powder, and a breath prayer to be spoken during brushing The idea, the elder says, was to charm both the mouth and the gods of affection. You can't help but wonder what the divorced days mixture looked like. Maybe extra vinegar. Some scrolls include diagrams, simple line sketches of teeth, gums, brushes, sticks. One shows how to split a twig and soften the end with water. Another details the angle at which to hold a reed cloth for best results. There's even one labeled, "For small mouths," with measurements for children's tooth twigs. You flip to a final scroll, more recent looking, with additions in a newer hand. The elder points to a line and says, "That's mine." His contribution? Salt with dried orange peel. Chew before song. You try it. It's shockingly sharp at first, then mellow. Like biting citrus dust on a warm wind. The scrolls are real. Tangible proof that what seems like instinct, brushing, rinsing, spitting, was deeply considered. Not just for function, but for ritual, for healing, for the subtle magic of self-care. You ask him if any of it actually worked, if any one paste or rinse stood above the rest. He shrugs. Depends on the teeth and the hands. Fair. You help him roll up the scrolls and return them to their basket. As you stand to leave, he presses something into your palm, a small flat stone, smooth from use. Good for grinding leaf, he says, or just to hold. You carry it with you as you step back into the brightness of day. Outside, a woman is teaching her daughter how to prepare morning powder. She uses crushed mint, a pinch of salt, and water from a shaded jug. They dip their cloths in together and brush side by side, humming softly. No temple, no priest, no scrolls. Just two people passing knowledge like a lit candle between hands. And that's when it hits you. These scrolls aren't the only record of Egypt's toothpaste legacy. The real archive is woven into the daily gestures of its people. Into each chewed twig, each scraped bowl, each whispered recipe. What survives in ink is rare. What survives in habit is everywhere. You walk on, the grinding stones still warm in your palm, the scent of mint lingering on your breath, and a growing appreciation for the quiet genius hidden in everyday things. The grinding stone feels heavier in your palm now, not from weight, but from meaning. It's no longer just a tool. It's a relic, a symbol of thousands of years of whispered advice, accidental brilliance, and stubborn grit. Literally, you're back on the road again, following a camel caravan that winds its way slowly across the dunes. Their bells jingle softly in the heat. Flies buzz lazily. The traders are headed south toward Aswan, and you've joined for the day, not to buy, not to sell, but to listen. These are the carriers of ancient oral care. Not the priests, not the scholars, but the ones who load up jars of powdered peppermint, bundles of sweet bark, sacks of crushed rock salt, and haul them from oasis to oasis, on their backs, by foot and beast. You ride for a while beside a man in russet robes, his lips cracked from wind, but his eyes bright. He carries a reed box filled with nothing but pastes and powders. My family makes these, he says, different for every season. Dry months, wet months, funerals, weddings. He offers you a taste of one, cinnamon bark ground with burnt barley and dried fig skin. You dab a bit on your tongue. It's smoky with a sharp edge. You imagine brushing your teeth with it and can almost feel the sensation already. Warmth, bite, comfort. The man laughs when he sees your reaction. This one we call the brave husband blend. Used before proposals. Makes sense. You'll want clean breath before making lifelong commitments. As the caravan trudges through a narrow pass lined with red stone, another merchant opens his satchel and reveals clay jars etched with symbols. Some carry the seal of temple approval. Others bear the name of the trader's house. There's a hierarchy here. The temple blends are more expensive. The family ones more flavorful. You notice each jar has a faint color variation. Pale green for mint-heavy blends. golden brown for cinnamon mixes, deep gray-black for charcoal-heavy pastes. Historians still piece together these trade routes by analyzing trace ingredients in dental powders discovered inside burial jars and tomb caches. Some find traces of cinnamon from India, natron from Wadi Natron, clove from the Spice Islands, even rare floral oils that must have traveled hundreds of miles. This toothpaste, it turns out, wasn't just local invention. It was global collaboration before the word global even existed. You ask one of the traders how long he's been on the road. He squints at the sky, then shrugs. "Since I had teeth," he says, grinning. "Then lost a few. Now I sell powders to help others keep theirs." Poetic. The caravan stops at a small desert well. You dismount and help unload a few jars. A woman spreads out a cloth and begins arranging her tooth blends. Travelers crowd around her like bees to a flower. One man wants something for bleeding gums. Another wants to impress a potential bride. A third just says, "The breath of my tent is cursed." She nods, unfazed. She mixes powders with oil from a small flask, adding herbs like a painter dabbing color. The mixtures are simple: cinnamon and wine, salt and papyrus ash, mint and goat milk. You notice she uses her nose almost more than her hands, smelling each blend before she offers it. You watch, and then, unable to resist, ask if you can make your own. She laughs but nods. You reach for rock salt, a pinch of dried orange peel, crushed basil. You grind them on a flat stone, just as you've seen all over Egypt. Then you add a drop of vinegar and stir with a reed. The scent is clean. Warm, a little sharp. You try it. Success. Possibly your best creation yet. She claps gently. "You've made a blend for morning anger," she says. It wakes the mouth and warns others to tread carefully. You offer the rest to her. She bottles it in a tiny jar, seals it with wax, and places it beside her own. "Your name?" she asks. You hesitate. "Just someone passing through." She nods again. "Then I'll call it Dust of the Walker." You smile, flattered. Somehow you've joined the long, dusty line of toothpaste merchants. The caravan sets off again, this time tracing the edge of the Nile where papyrus grows thick. You travel beside the river as twilight settles over the dunes. The light turns honey-colored. The camels grunt softly. Everyone falls into a slow rhythm, footfalls padding gently over sand. You catch snippets of conversation, recipes, stories, rivalries. One trader claims his grandfather's mint was so strong it made a scribe cry mid-ritual. Another boasts of a blend so smooth the queen's cat licked it off her hand. Were these stories true? Historians would roll their eyes. But you're too busy enjoying the ride. Because whether the toothpaste worked or not, whether it truly cured abscesses or merely masked morning breath, one thing is undeniable. These jars carried not just powders, but people. Their hopes, their pain, their love for the little things that made them feel human. Clean breath, clean spirit, the courage to smile. As the stars appear again, blinking into place like old friends, you fall into step with the traders. Each of them holds a secret in their bag, a blend, a belief, a recipe that traveled farther than they ever dreamed. And somewhere in your pack, you carry a jar of your own. You leave the caravan the next morning, waving farewell as the traders disappear into the golden haze, their silhouettes shrinking beneath the rising sun. Your feet are dusty, your satchel smells faintly of clove and vinegar, and your teeth, oddly, feel both gritty and cared for. There's something comforting about that contrast, like the desert itself. Harsh, but dependable. You head north now, toward a port town where Nile boats drift lazily between papyrus banks. It's livelier here, louder, more opinionated, and it's not long before you overhear something unexpected. "They don't even clean their teeth," one Greek envoy mutters under his breath. eyeing a local merchant packing up bundles of mint and natron. No olive oil, no wine rinse, just sand and hope. You pause. The Egyptian merchant raises an eyebrow. Our mouths have outlasted your empires? A tense silence. You step aside, amused, and watch the back and forth unfold. Apparently, this isn't just trade. It's dental diplomacy. The Greeks, having only recently arrived in Egypt, carry their own ideas of oral care. Olive oil rinses, powdered marble, wine and mint blends, they mock the local reliance on crushed rocks and twigs, even as they quietly barter for them. Later, you follow one such envoy, an older man with robes just a little too clean, as he meets a tooth powder vendor in a back alley. The Greek inspects the jar like it contains gold. He sniffs, dips a pinky in, tastes it. His eyebrows rise. Surprisingly robust. The vendor grins. It's goat hoof and hibiscus. Cleans, brightens, summons the favor of Ra. The Greek nods slowly, then pays in coin. He walks away, carefully slipping the jar into a velvet pouch, glancing over his shoulder like he's just bought forbidden love. Historians still debate whether such exchanges were common or exceptional. Some argue that cultural snobbery kept the Greeks from adopting Egyptian hygiene habits. Others point to medical papyri found in both cultures with suspiciously similar formulas. Perhaps, as always, public posturing covered private admiration. Back in the main square, a Roman merchant unloads amphorae filled with garum, fermented fish sauce, and immediately earns the disdain of every nearby Egyptian. They eat that, someone whispers, and they question our breath? You chuckle quietly. It's easy to forget, amid all this dusty scroll reading and ancient ritual, that dental hygiene has always been a little judgmental, a little prideful. People want to believe their way is the best, their mint fresher, their rinse more sacred, their mouth more civilized. But watch closely, and the truth peeks through. That same Greek envoy? He's spotted again later, chewing on a willow twig behind a granary. A Roman trader? Dabbing powdered pumice on his gums before a meeting with a high-ranking priest. The locals pretend not to notice. The foreigners pretend not to care. But the twigs disappear faster than anything else at the market. You follow a Persian traveler into a courtyard where tooth care recipes are being exchanged like gossip. She offers a blend of saffron and tamarind resin. In return, she receives a jar of peppermint and natron. Both sniff the results, nod in satisfaction, and return to their respective worlds, smiling. One woman offers to show you her family's recipe. Powdered blue lotus, ground barley chaff, dried honeycomb, and a splash of goat's milk. She hands you a little paste on a linen square. You try it. It's unexpectedly delicious. Creamy, floral, with a rough edge that makes your teeth hum. She laughs. Even the Greeks like it. They just don't admit it. You ask how she learned to make it. She shrugs. My grandmother said her great-grandmother learned it from a Syrian dancer who lost a tooth during a performance. There's always a story. You walk along the docks as the sun climbs higher. Sailors are rinsing their mouths with beer and salt water. A priest mutters verses while scrubbing his molars with a cloth. A Roman soldier grins at a Nubian girl, revealing a mouth full of surprisingly white teeth, then quickly turns away to swish something from a tiny jar tucked in his belt. The riverside becomes your museum now. No labels, no glass cases, just people chewing, rinsing, laughing, spitting. A living exhibit of cross-cultural dental improvisation. You pass a stall selling foreign powders. The jars are labeled with dramatic names: Breath of Athens, Kiss of Kush, Teeth like papyrus blossoms. Each smells vaguely of cinnamon and lies, but people buy them anyway. Not for function, but for identity. Because sometimes toothpaste isn't about plaque, it's about pride. Still, some things are universal. You find a Greek scribe carefully drawing diagrams of molars on parchment, labeling pressure points. He's fascinated by a temple scroll he found describing hot needle therapy for toothworms. You ask if he believes in toothworms. He smirks and says, only on bad dates. He shows you a formula he's working on. Egyptian natron, plus Greek olive oil, plus Roman crushed oyster shell, plus Syrian myrrh. He calls it Pantheon paste. You try a dab. It tastes like conquest and compromise. And yet, it's not bad. As the sun begins to set and the market slowly folds into itself, you sit on a low step near the wharf and reflect. Trade didn't just move spices, grain, and gold. It moved habits, routines, recipes for something as personal and as powerful as a smile. Even the conquerors couldn't resist a good paste. And if nothing else, you've learned this. No matter where you're from, no matter how you chew, rinse, spit, or scrub, everyone, everywhere, just wants their breath to not ruin the moment. The wind shifts slightly that evening, rolling in cooler from the north. You're seated on a flat rooftop made of mud brick and palm trunks, overlooking the flickering lamps of the village and the slow-moving silver ribbon of the Nile. The hum of insects plays a sleepy melody, and somewhere, someone is grinding something against a stone, probably for teeth. And that gets you thinking. If Egyptian toothpaste was so common, so refined, why don't we hear more about it in modern times? Surely something this ancient must have left more evidence, right? You remember your visits to the temples, the markets, the scrolls? But then you also remember what time does to things. It dries them, cracks them, buries them in silence, and that's where the archaeologists come in. The next day, you travel to the site of an active excavation. Nothing fancy, just a group of dusty figures crouched around shallow pits, brushing away centuries with goat hair brushes and infinite patience. You watch from a distance at first, not wanting to interrupt, but soon, one of them waves you over. They found something, a small squat jar, ceramic, reddish-brown, with a lid sealed in resin. It takes effort, but the archaeologist pries it open. Inside, powder, pale gray, dry as the desert. It smells faintly of myrrh and, oddly, ash. He grins. Toothpaste, he says. Well, not toothpaste in the modern sense. There's no fluoride, no neon swirl, no promises of enamel whitening in 10 days or less. But the analysis matches several known ingredients: natron, crushed iris root, traces of dried mint, and, this part is hotly debated, a speck of ground turquoise. Historians still argue about that one. Some think it was intentional, a luxury inclusion. Others believe it's contamination from a nearby burial amulet. The jury's out. As always, you ask how often they find these jars. More than you'd think, the archaeologist replies, but not always labeled. Some we only identify because they're found near brushes or inside mouth-shaped containers. Once, we found one stored inside a statue's mouth. That was interesting. You continue exploring the dig. Another researcher shows you a set of human remains, well preserved, though the teeth are worn almost flat. You see what looks like deep vertical grooves along the molars. Stone ground flour, she says knowingly. It sandpapers the enamel over a lifetime. That's why oral care was so necessary here. Not optional, but constant. Next, she shows you a wooden box, unearthed from what was once a workshop. Inside, reed brushes, bundled twigs, flat stones stained with dried residue, and a small, beautifully painted jar marked with a symbol. For breath. You run your fingers over the lid. It feels smooth and cool. And suddenly, the idea of toothpaste becomes very real. Not a myth, not an exaggeration, but something someone made, used, refilled, treasured. The excavation site slows as the sun grows hotter. Workers stretch beneath canopies, sip water. and brush the dust from their knees. You sit beneath a fig tree, watching the light dance across the ruins. It's strange how something so ordinary can survive so long. A recipe for a paste, a stick chewed to fray, a jar sealed and forgotten, waiting centuries to be opened again. And yet here it is. Back in town, you visit a small museum, the kind with dim lighting and handwritten signs. There's a display labeled Ancient Oral Care, easy to miss if you're not looking. Inside, 2 jars, a frayed stick and a scrap of papyrus with a faint recipe barely visible to the eye. A boy beside you points to the stick and says, "It looks like a wand." You nod. In a way, it was, because toothpaste wasn't just a blend of powders. It was intention. It was care. It was a kind of everyday magic. Not showy, not loud, but persistent, intimate, human. You move on to another case, a mummified body. The teeth are remarkably intact. Worn, sure, but clean. You can imagine that person, thousands of years ago, crouching by the river, scrubbing their molars with a twig, spitting into the sand, and starting their day with a cleaner mouth than most people with electric toothbrushes. The museum guide tells you about recent residue analysis on ancient dental tools, how they found traces of spices, ash, and once tiny fragments of granite. Apparently, someone had been very committed to the scrub with rocks method. You step outside again, the late afternoon sun warm on your face. The city feels different now, not just a place of statues and stories, but of habits, of small decisions repeated daily, of a culture that cared about health in the places no one else could see. You pass a vendor selling modern toothpaste in tiny foil tubes. One is cinnamon flavored. Another, improbably, is labeled Faro Mint. You buy one. Why not? You walk past a pharmacy window filled with toothbrushes, mouthwashes, whitening kits, gum picks, tongue scrapers. All of it sleek, colorful, sterilized. And yet, you can't help but think of the elder back in the village, grinding mint and salt with a stone, smiling with only a few teeth left, but all of them loved. And maybe, just maybe, we haven't come that far. You leave the museum behind and walk slowly along the riverbank, the Nile now reflecting the soft amber hues of the waning day. The air feels heavier here, less from heat and more from memory. You step off the path and sit beneath a palm, your satchel resting against your side, the little cinnamon toothpaste tube inside feeling out of place among the river reeds. As the wind ripples across the water, your thoughts drift to the absurd beauty of it all. Thousands of years ago, someone crouched here, in this very soil, mixing powders and pastes and quietly solving the same problems we still Google at 2 a.m. How to stop a toothache? How to get rid of bad breath? Does chewing mint actually work? The answers, as it turns out, were always with us. And now, centuries later, we're still brushing, still rinsing, still grimacing at sharp flavors, and secretly enjoying that satisfying sting that makes your mouth feel reborn. You think back to the stories from the priests, the spice traders, the commoners, the boy who chewed the fig twig, the woman who made a wedding day blend, the temple scroll filled with metaphors and medical advice, mashed into one. And you remember, people didn't treat toothpaste like a product. They treated it like a practice, a personal ritual, a miniature ceremony tucked between breakfast and sleep. It wasn't a thing you bought. It was a thing you did. And perhaps that's what's missing today. Not fluoride or foam or flashy branding, but reverence, or at the very least, attentiveness. You get up and walk again, this time toward a dig site not far from the water. Here, archaeologists are uncovering what was once a home. A modest, square room with collapsed walls and a floor of hard-packed earth. There's not much left, except for a basin carved into the corner and a handful of ceramic shards. One of the researchers waves you over. "We think this was a kitchen," she says, brushing dirt from the edge of a small lidded jar. Or maybe a workshop. Hard to tell. You crouch beside her and peer inside. Still clinging to the inner curve of the jar is a faint, pale residue. A chalky ring. A signature, not of ink, but of habit. She explains they'll analyze the substance, look for calcium, salt, floral oils. It might confirm a dental recipe. It might not, but she's hopeful. It's always the mundane objects, she says. That's where the truth lives. And she's right, because it's not the golden statues or temple glyphs that teach you how to care for your mouth. It's the bowl on the floor, the bundle of twigs on the shelf, the mother showing her child how to chew the end just enough to make the fibers fan out. You return to your satchel and pull out your own jar, the one you mixed back with the traveling merchants. The dust of the walker, they called it. It's mostly rock salt now with traces of orange peel and basil. You dip a finger in and press it to your teeth. It tastes faintly like the road. Dry, sharp, persistent. You smile. Nearby, a young archaeologist is drawing a diagram of the dig, sketching the floor plan and marking where the basin sits. You ask if they've ever found a toothbrush. Sort of, she says. Chewed sticks mostly, worn smooth on one end, sometimes bundled with cloth. We used to overlook them. Now, we bag each one like it's a royal scepter. You sit beside her, sharing a canteen of water and a few quiet minutes. Did you know, she says, we found powdered clove in a child's burial? You blink. Was it for ritual? She shrugs. Could have been for teething pain. Or just something they liked. Historians still argue over finds like that, whether to interpret them as symbolic or functional. But here's the thing. Does it matter? A mother 4,000 years ago cradled her child and rubbed their gums with something warm and sweet, something she hoped would soothe. That's all the context you need. You walk again as twilight deepens. The village lights flicker on in the distance. You pass a group of children brushing their teeth with frayed reeds, giggling as they spit in unison like it's a race. You hear a grandmother warning her grandson not to swallow the vinegar rinse, or his voice will vanish like smoke. Probably nonsense, but he listens anyway. There's joy in these gestures, not duty, not shame, just gentle routine, passed down like a lullaby. And somewhere in all this dusty, mint-scented history, you begin to realize something. Toothpaste didn't survive because it was effective. It survived because it was loved. Because in a world of chariots and temples and wars and dynasties, someone still cared enough to mash a leaf, grind a stone, and whisper, "Try this, it might help." You stop at the river's edge one last time, rinsing your hands in the cool water. The stars shimmer above, reflected in the shallows like scattered teeth. You take out your travel blend, swipe a bit on your reed brush, and give your teeth one last scrub under the moonlight. You're not royalty. You're not a priest. But here you are, brushing your teeth like it's 1500 BCE, and maybe, just maybe, the gods approve. By morning, the Nile is once again the color of sunlit copper, gliding past fields and memories without hurry. You've made your way upstream to a quieter village, less polished than the port towns, more lived in. Here, the people don't speak of toothpaste. They don't call it that. They call it what it is: salt, stick, care. You wake early before the birds even warm up their voices, and join a young girl and her grandmother seated near a cooking fire. The air smells of lentils and smoke, and something oddly minty. The girl is grinding dried leaves with a rounded stone, her tiny fingers nimble and practiced. "Peppermint," the grandmother says, "from the garden." You ask what else they add. Sometimes basil, sometimes ashes from the clean fire. If he's lucky, she nods toward a boy sleeping nearby. A drop of honey. The girl hands you the stone to try. You press and circle it against the mint, crushing it to a fine, fragrant powder. It clings to your fingertips like green dust. You don't need a scroll to know what happens next. The girl adds a pinch of salt, spits into the bowl, just a little, and stirs it with a stick. Then she takes a twig from a bundle, chews the end thoughtfully, dips it, and starts brushing. A perfect morning, 3,000 years ago, and also now. You do the same. The paste stings a little, but it's fresh, grounding. The salt pulls at your tongue. The mint wakes your breath. You spit and rinse with water from a clay jug. You smile. And just like that, you're a link in a chain of care that stretches from your mouth all the way back to people who built pyramids, traded herbs by boat, and worshipped the goddess of harmony before brushing their teeth in the river. The day unfolds slowly. You visit another family preparing a wedding blend, this one floral and slightly sweet. There's laughter teasing. The bride tastes the mixture and grimaces. "Too salty," she says. "He'll think I'm already bitter." The groom replies, "Then I'll double the honey." You walk away with a small jar of their final mixture tucked in your bag. Later, you sit with an elder who has no teeth left, but still brushes his gums twice a day with a frayed reed dipped in cooled clove water. "The teeth may go," he says, "but the breath must stay polite." That should be carved in stone. You help a young boy split his first chewing twig, his mother showing him how to press it gently with his molars until the end fans out like a soft brush. He grins as it tickles his gums. He'll remember this moment, you think. The way he laughed, the way she smiled when he got it right. These things stick. Even now you can feel the rhythm of it all settling into your bones. Because this whole journey wasn't about ancient toothpaste formulas or papyrus prescriptions or debating what counts as dental innovation. It was about noticing what people do when no one tells them how, what they pass down person to person in the quiet spaces between waking and working. And somewhere in that noticing, you came to understand toothpaste isn't a product. It's a ritual, a whisper, a choice. It's the way a child mimics a grandparent. The way a woman adds one more herb to her mixture just because it smells like memory. The way you chewed on a stick at dawn and realized you'd never felt more clean. The sun begins to dip again, casting long gold shadows across the village walls. You sit by the river one last time, dipping your hands in the water. You pull out your jar, dust of the walker, and smile at what it's become. Part memory, part experiment, part tribute. You brush one last time, slowly, reverently. And you realize you've been chewing on more than bark. You've been chewing on history, and it's left your breath fresh and your mind still. So now, as the sun slips away behind the reeds and the stars stretch lazily across the sky, you lie back on your woven mat. The night air is cooler now, quieter. The last fires are dying down, and the laughter has faded into soft murmurs and the rustling of palm leaves in the breeze. You breathe slowly through your nose, tasting the last traces of mint and salt, your mouth gently tingling with the echo of something ancient. And in that stillness, you feel held, not just by the ground beneath you, but by thousands of years of hands that once mixed, ground, chewed, and passed knowledge down like a secret. You feel the weight of time in your breath, but it's a comforting weight, like a blanket, like belonging. Out there, the river keeps flowing, the stars keep shining, and somewhere, a child chews the end of a twig just the way you did. Somewhere, someone grinds salt and basil, smiling at the memory of a grandmother's hands. And you're still, you're safe, you're part of it now. So let yourself rest, let your breath slow, let the gentle hum of the night cradle you like the rhythm of a reed brush on a molar. You've wandered far, tasted much, and found something simple and beautiful in the ordinary. Now, close your eyes, let go of the day, and drift into sleep with a clean spirit and a quietly glowing smile